Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 987 days, Ukraine stands strong against the forces of the Russian invasion. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky congratulated Donald Trump on his quote-unquote impressive election victory. He recalled their meeting back in September when they discussed in detail the Ukraine-US strategic partnership, the victory plan, and ways to put an end to Russian aggression against Ukraine. Zelensky said that he appreciates President Trump's commitment to the peace through strength approach in global affairs. Quote, "We look forward to an era of a strong United States of America under President Trump's decisive leadership. We rely on continued strong bipartisan support for Ukraine in the United States." Unquote. Later in the day, Zelensky had an excellent call with President Donald Trump, reports Interfax Ukraine. The Ukrainian leader praised Trump's family and team for their great work. Quote, "We agreed to maintain close dialogue and advance our cooperation. Strong and unwavering U.S. leadership is vital for the world and for a just peace," unquote, said the Ukrainian president. Ukrainian analysts and politicians pointed out that Trump's victory doesn't really change Kyiv's approach to its partnership with the US. Ukraine still needs bipartisan support. Meanwhile, Ukrainians were quite sarcastic about Trump's victory and reminded of his promise to end the war just 24 hours after his victory. Politico informs that Joe Biden's administration plans to use up the entire balance of funds allocated for military assistance to Ukraine by the day of Donald Trump's inauguration on 20th of January 2025, reports European Pravda. As of the close of 2024 fiscal year on 30th of September, the US administration retained over $6 billion in available funds designated for military aid to Ukraine. Politico says the Biden administration currently has $4.3 billion at its disposal to provide weapons from U.S. Army stockpiles, and another $2.1 billion to purchase weapons under contracts with U.S. defense companies. The White House is now working to deploy these funds as quickly as possible to ensure that Ukraine has enough weapons to counter Russian offensives even if Trump refuses to continue sending aid. Politico sources point out, however, that it normally takes months to send US-allocated weapons to Ukraine, so any packages announced in the coming weeks are unlikely to arrive in full before the end of January 2025, at which point Trump could suspend his shipments. Another problem, Politico sources say, is the lack of sufficient weapons in US Army stockpiles. Although the cost is covered from the allocated budget, replacing them could take a long time. During the election campaign, Trump made it clear that he would cut or drastically reduce military aid to Ukraine if he won on 5th of November. He also refused to say that he wanted Ukraine to win the war. We would really appreciate if you could rate us, ideally with 5 stars, and leave a glowing review in the app where you're listening to this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others. This really helps more people to find out about the highlights from Ukraine and truth about Russia's invasion. Ukrainian analytical and open intelligence project Deep State informs that the Russian forces occupied about 490 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory in October, which is the highest figure for 2024 and for the Russian counteroffensive that has been going on since October 2023, reports NV. At the same time, analysts emphasize that there is no need to measure everything by area because it is people who are fighting and they are the guarantee of the army's sustainability and its potential for resistance. The indicator is the capabilities of the military industry and the level of training of the conscripts, the degree of mechanization, the availability of long-range strike capabilities, and most importantly, the rational use of human potential. The latter sadly is becoming a weak point for Ukraine, the Deep State notes. In turn, the Russians are correcting their mistakes. While cannon fodder units used to be a classic for their army, nowadays their regiments and brigades are increasingly spending additional weeks and months training their personnel. The presence of a large number of manpower allows the Russians to conduct regular rotations every 1 or 2 months. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast. We're a commercial initiative of just 2 people and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.